If you ever find vinyl from this artist in the thrift store or dollar bin or very cheap, buy it and send it to me and I'll pay you back. That's what's coming up. Topic today is Thor. Thor. See my Thor shirt? Thor. Now, you may know of Thor from the comics. You may know of Thor from the Avengers, from the movies. I'm talking Thor, the Rock Warrior. Thor is a artist, band, singer that not a whole lot of people may know because he never rose above the level of, had a cult following. He has a lot of fans, but he's not in the mainstream. You may have heard about him a little in the 80s, but he's still alive and well and has been releasing albums all along. Do you have any of those bands that maybe the rest of the world doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to, or maybe, kind of comes across to some people as being kind of cheesy, maybe, lack of respect, but yet you love them and you follow them and buy their stuff? That's what Thor is to me. Now, Thor is a bodybuilder. He attempts to be an actor. He's a singer, plays a little music. And he got his start back in the 70s, like 73, 74. At that time, he went through different band names. His name is John. I always pronounce it Michael, but it's M-I-K-L. It might be Mikl. He's Canadian. I just say Michael because it sounds, American. So I may be wrong. Don't get mad if I'm saying his name wrong. But John Michael Thor. Back in the days, in the 70s, he would go by the Michael Body Rock. He's a bodybuilder, as you can tell. He went by Thor and the Imps because of his band. He had a bunch of different names that he's went through over the years, and somewhere in the later 70s, he settled on just the band name Thor. Now, back in the 70s, there's some clips out there on YouTube that you could find. He was on like the Merv Griffin show. And you watch that and you're just like, this is kind of embarrassing, but this was the 70s and he's out there. I think that Merv Griffin show problem was the band that was backing him, but anyway, you can look it up and check it out. But he had weird costumes and kind of just a whole show playing into the show thing. He is a heavy metal singer that in America has never really broke through very big, even though he's got a pretty big following. He has a movie that recently came out called I Am Thor. It's kind of his history. It was on Netflix for a while, but I went looking for it yesterday, and it's been taken off of there. But you can still rent it, buy it. There's a soundtrack and everything. But I discovered him back in the 80s. Back in 83-ish, maybe early 84, I found an EP by him called Unchained. Found it on vinyl in the independent records section of the record store. And so I bought it. And, it was not necessarily on the same level production-wise or, song skills-wise as what I was listening to at that time. You had the Motley Crues and the Def Leppards and the Iron Maidens and all that. I mean, it was a hard rock, borderline metal, but, kind of low budget. I bought it. I liked it, enjoyed it. And so it was later on, after buying this, I went in the military and was stationed elsewhere. And I was looking through the record store in their cutout bin at the time. Again, this would be 1984, early 85, I guess. And I ran across an album by Thor. Now, I didn't know anything about him from the Unchained album. I had that. That was all I had. I didn't know anything else about him. We didn't have the internet back then. He wasn't covered in many of the magazines. So when I found this album, Thor, obviously I recognized that it's the same guy. I'm like, well, this is Thor, Keep the Dogs Away. I noticed that the album was from 1977. So I went ahead and bought it, and it was different. It was a little more I almost want to say disco-y, but not really disco. It was rock, but it had a different flair to it, kind of a danceability type singing. Actually, I have the album, the vinyl now. So the vinyl looked like this. This is a reissue, so this was reissued a couple years ago on Deadline. And so I bought this, and this one even comes with a replica of the same poster that I found in the one that I bought back in the day. So they've really, reproduced this pretty much identical to what that one was. Now, I bought that and I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's the only two things I had. And again, it was definitely a little different style-wise than, the kind of metal I was listening to. But there was something about it that kind of appealed to me. I don't know if it was the kind of just being a little campy, but I guess that's more of a movie word. But it was just something that was kind of interesting about it. Maybe it's because I was a big Marvel Heroes fan. Maybe I like Thor, so I was just getting into that. But I have continued over the years to pick up anything I could by Thor. Now, like I said, this was reissued on CD a few years ago. It's got bonus tracks, as most of his stuff does. So it's got the 10 original tracks. And even then, I think the original tracks, there was some bonus tracks added to that. But then there's like 7 extra tracks on here, so that was neat. Then it got reissued again more recently by Deadline. And this is a digipack thing that opens up. And it's a 2 CD set. And then there's actually a third disc, which is a DVD concert from back in the early 80s. So this is kind of like everything you could think of from this time frame, including a lot more. I mean, the second disc alone has 22 additional tracks. So it's got the 10 original plus 22 bonus tracks, and some of these date back to the 70s when it was Thor and the Imps, or Mikl Body Rock, or Michael Body Rock, or the early things. So this is where you start getting a taste of the things that had been recorded and released prior to that. So the one album, and then they did the same thing with Unchained. So this was the original CD release. It's got about, because originally it had like 5 songs. Now this one's got 11. And this was reissued a few years back. And it, very remastered and very nice. And then after that, Deadline did another reissue. And again, same thing. It is a box set with 2 CDs. And it's got a booklet of information and things online. So it's kind of like, and it's got, here's a picture of the band back in the day. Very metal looking. And so it's got, and this includes his EP that came out before this called Lightning Strikes. Pretty much a lot of the same songs, but had been re-recorded for this EP. And so they've got the original one on there that it gives you some extra bonuses there. But the one album that most people would know by Thor, if they knew anything about him, is going to be the one called Only the Strong. Now, this one has probably got the best production. This is probably, as far as sound quality of the recording, this is probably a high water mark, because I think at this point he had been discovered. He played in England in '84-ish, got really popular pretty quick, and so they put this album out, and this is kind of a major label release, or it's, like I said, more money behind it than usual. So this is the album, and this is the album if anybody were to say, well, where should I start with Thor? Because you'll see there's a lot of stuff that Thor has. I would say start with this, because this is probably the one that sounds the best. This is going to be the one that's got good production. The songs are good. It's a good metal album. Now, this one also reissued by Deadline a couple years ago. And it is another multiple set. This one's got a DVD from back in the day, a live concert, and CD. And this has a bunch of bonus tracks and demo tracks also. And that one has also been reissued on vinyl in recent years. It's been released on red and blue vinyl. I got the blue. It includes a bunch of pictures from back in the day. You can see this without the glare. They were all about the show and the costumes and the music. He would blow up water bottles and burst them on stage. He would bend metal bars between his teeth. You can find a lot of stuff on YouTube. I'll put some links below for some of the videos to check out. And then he put out a live album, live in Detroit. And this has also been released on vinyl. I just have yet to get a copy. They're not super expensive, but priorities, and this was not one of them here since I got all the CDs. So that was about the time when he kind of left the music scene for a little bit and started to focus on wanting to be an actor. And he went out and made a movie called Rock and Roll Nightmare. His band did most all the music for it under the band name, because the movie's about a band who goes to an abandoned house to record and do some stuff, and they start getting bothered by these crazy looking creatures that are like puppets. Very campy film. Big following of people that like this film, but it's very much a low budget, not so great of an acting, low budget effects, low budget look and feel. It was the 80s though. It was the mid 80s. A lot of movies were released like that. So, but it has become a cult classic for people who love Thor. This was a recently reissued CD of it, and it's got a bunch of sound clips as well as all of the songs by the band that appears in here. You'll also see this album listed online as The Edge of Hell, which is a different name because I guess the movie technically is The Edge of Hell, Rock and Roll Nightmare. So this version has a lot more songs. It's been most recently reissued, and the other one is the actual soundtrack that's just got the core songs from the thing. So at that point he goes and he does acting, and he did that. Before he did that, he did a movie called Recruits, which I think was more or less him being part of it, but he did a soundtrack for that. So there's an album out there, soundtrack for that called Recruits under John Mikl Thor. Let's see. He also there was another movie he did at that time, Zombie Nightmare in '87, and honestly I haven't seen that one. And then he's made some appearances in the 2000s and other movies, but he finally around '97 came back on the scene after, like I say, a few years of being inactive. He came on the scene and released Thunderstruck Tales from the Equinox. Now, at the time I bought this, I wasn't sure, is this a new album or is this just a bunch of old songs? Because the songs kind of sound like they were old. They may have been from the back catalog. And honestly, at this point, I don't have a lot of details on it, but I mean, I looked them up and most of these songs seem to be newer, so this most likely was a new album. And that came out in '97. And then there was an anthology that came out around the same time, and it had some songs. I think some of these had been older, that had been re-recorded, and but still it was new, and this has been reissued a couple times now with different covers. And so this was in '97. We started to see him come back. I have a different copy. There's a different copy with a different cover, so I had two copies of that. So I think I had kind of lost track of Thor up until that point. I found those albums on eBay at the time. eBay was just starting to get popular in the '90s. So I was like, oh, some new Thor material. That's cool. Then in 2000, he releases this. He's kind of with this Coalition Against Shane. It's a split album. So it's called Keeping the Dogs Away. It's got the Coalition Against Shane, I guess, is like a punkish type band. So they got like 13 tracks on here. And then Thor has 4 tracks, one of which is live. And then Thor has kind of a punk side project called Thor and the Ass Boys. So, and it's just Thor singing, and the music's a little more aggressive. So they have 3 songs on here too. So I bought this, kind of, an interesting compilation. And that's in 2000. Then what I consider, because those albums, were all, it just seemed like it was kind of like things were getting started. But it wasn't until 2001 when he came up with Dogs 2. Now the first album, if you recall, was called Keeping the Dogs Away. This is called Dogs 2. This album sounded like more modern music, whereas the Tales from the Equinox, stuff like that, it just kind of sounded like older songs that had been either re-recorded or just brought back. This sounded fresh and new, and this to this day is still one of my favorite of the, let's say, the Thor of the 2000s. This is one of the albums that I still go back to that I really enjoy. So, and this, I actually bought the reissue of this. It has some bonus tracks too. Then he goes into Triumphant. So around this time, he did another movie called Intercessor, which is Rock and Roll Nightmare Part 2. I've seen a lot of bits and pieces of this movie. I've read a lot of reviews. I've heard a lot of reviews. I've seen reviews of people who watched it. And it's really low budget. It's really bad effects. It's again campy. Some people like it. Most people just think it's horrible. I haven't taken the time to really track it down to see it. It's just one of those things. Oh, speaking of, so Rock and Roll Nightmare, around a couple years ago when that soundtrack was released, it did come out. I do have the DVD of that. So, and this is nice. It comes with a bunch of extras and stuff. So you can check this out. This is on DVD. Most people say don't check out the Intercessor. While we're on the tune of, he also has, I mentioned Anthorology. There's also a DVD called Anthorology. And it's got like every video and a bunch of live stuff. So there's like 21 things with some end credits. But news clips, the Merv Griffin stuff, videos from the 70s, 77, 79, a Thor-cumentary, stuff from the 80s, 81, 82, just all kinds of, it's like pretty much every video appearance that he's done on that. So that's really a neat thing to have. So back to this. So in 2002, Triumphant, and this has the song on here from Intercessor, and it was in the soundtrack and everything. The Intercessor soundtrack I checked out, it seems like there's only like 2 Thor songs on it, and there's a bunch of other bands. Another really good album. Now, the thing is about most of the stuff in the 2000s that he did, I really enjoy it. It's, good music. At times the lyrics, you can tell they're, maybe not written as well as you're used to. A little, people might say, oh, it's a little cheesy, but hey, it's one of those things where I just enjoy the stuff he's done, and so I enjoy it. But the production on these is, a little more lower budget. So you're talking, that's not like demo quality, but it's lower budget than you're probably used to. So you just got to get prepared for that. It's just, it'd be nice if it had a little more money behind it to be a little thicker, heavier, a little less tinny. But still, you look beyond that, and the music is really fun. This one, again, I bought a reissue of this one because there's a bunch of bonus tracks on here. He was also in a movie called Fubar as a Super Rocker. So there's a track from that on here. Then they released this. This is when before they remastered and re-released the Keep Dogs Away and stuff like that, where they've included a bunch of the old Thor and the Imp stuff. This album had come out, which had a bunch. It's kind of like a compilation of a retrospect of his whole career. So it's got stuff from the 70s up through the 2000s. And this is, I think, one of the first ones I received where it had stuff, from the 70s I got to hear. You can see from the costumes and stuff, the different things that he went through. Now, the interesting thing about this is it came, this CD, I made the case, I made the cover, I took the picture and printed it on there. This actual, just a CD came in a gatefold. Oops, there's a card in there. As you can see, it says right here, this does not contain an album. It's a CD in a vinyl cover. This did come out on vinyl, and if you ever see a copy of this out there on vinyl, it's like in purple and some other picture. There's a picture disc version. I definitely would like to have it. It came with the photo of what he looks like at the time, which would have been the early 2000s. He's about the same now, just a little bit older. And in here, it's got all kinds of pictures from back in the days. And an explanation of the songs, what year they were recorded, where they came from. And this would be, I believe, Thor and the Imps. This is the band. Before he went with the blonde hair, he had these, scantily clad people dancing around in silvery, shiny things. This is on Outlaw Records. This is number 126 of 500. Anyway, it was a cool retrospect and look back at what stuff he had done back in the days. And that was the first time I'd heard a lot of that until they recently reissued the early albums with a bunch of bonus tracks. Shortly after that, he did another, 2004, he did another split album with another band, DOA. Most of the tracks that are on here are songs that we've already heard before from previous albums, but sometimes they've been re-recorded. You can tell they're a different recording. But it's a split album. It's like the closest thing to new music, even though the songs were songs, for the most part, we have heard before. Then he teams up with Mick Hoffman. Now, Mick Hoffman does this kind of art. You've probably seen his art. He does a lot of the kind of graphic novel type art. But he also sings. And so this is kind of called a rock opera. Beast Woman from the Center of the Earth. Every other song on here is sung by Thor. Every other song is sung by Mick Hoffman. Still a good album. It's, it tells a story. It's supposed to be a rock opera, but just playing it alone, it's got some really cool tunes on here. Then, as I mentioned, with Dogs 2 being one of my favorite albums, 2005's Thor Against the World is ranking right up there. This is probably, this and Dogs 2 are fighting for which one I enjoy the most. This is just, it's fun, it's catchy, it's quirky, it's hard rock, but it's got some funny lyrics at times. Now, I have two versions of this. I have the regular one, but then just a couple years ago, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, on Thor's Facebook page, I kind of won a contest, and so he sent me this edition. And what it has is it had a different CD. The CD's kind of beat up, but the CD artwork is different from what the original CD looked like. And then this CD has somebody's little signature there, but then the inner case, even though it's upside down, Thor wrote a little message to me, as the winner, thanks for the support. So I have this edition, which has the autograph and things like that in it. But again, this is probably, like I say, one of my favorites of this time. I just really enjoy that. And then we have the Devastation of Musculation. This was the 2006 issue. This is probably the heaviest thing that he's done in quite a while. It's really more aggressive than what his music usually is, especially from Thor Against the World. This is like really just grinding heavy. I'm not thrash or anything. It's still just traditional type heavy metal, but it's a little more aggressive. Very good album, 2006. Into the Noise, 2007. It's around this time that you start seeing Thor's pumping out albums like every year. Got a lot of songs in there, a lot of songs in him, I guess. Into the Noise, and it's not as heavy as the previous album, but it's still in that heavy vein. Yeah, not much more I can say about that. I don't know a whole lot about this. You can read up on the notes, and it's got a lot of the original members, and it's been recorded by a bunch of different people. At this point, it's not so much a band as it is Thor using a bunch of musicians to release these albums, and this is a good one. And then there's this one, which I really don't know much about. It's a digital download only. It's called Steam Clock. It came out in 2008, the year after that. I've looked all over the internet, and I can't figure out anything about this album. It's on Amazon and iTunes. It doesn't tell you who plays on the album. It doesn't give you the background of what the album's about. I don't see any evidence anywhere. It says digital only, where it was. I don't see where it was ever released on any kind of media like a CD or anything. And it's a great album like the others, but it's like they didn't release it on. And it's not like it's old songs, these are regular new type songs. Some of these I've heard on later releases where these redone them, but so I don't know much about this. If you know anything about the Steam Clock album, I was looking, I'm researching, and some people said, hey, it's great to see him playing again with some of the old members. I don't know. I don't find any information on who played on this album. So if somebody knows something, I don't, and I haven't been able to find it out. Steam Clock, digital only release. Then there was a couple years of silence. In 2012, and I don't have this with me, it's a digital download. I did find a copy of this on vinyl yesterday at a real good price, so I bought it. But Thor played a concert somewhere up in the New England area. I want to say New York, but it might have been somewhere else. He played with the band called, I forget, they were kind of a different band, but the album is called Thor's Teeth, because the band's name has teeth in it, and I can't remember the name, and I feel bad. So he played with this band, and he came out and sang, and they did a whole 11-song set or more of Thor material, and it's released on vinyl. It was released on different versions of vinyl, and those are all sold out. And then it was reissued about 2 years later on a glow-in-the-dark vinyl, and that's the one I was able to get for a decent price. Because the ones that were originally released, he's got a pretty big following, like I say, in a lot of areas. He's just not commercially well-known. But those other original vinyls are selling for $50 to $200. So I bought one for $15 plus shipping, and it glows in the dark. So then he did that in 2012, and then he releases in 2012 Thunderstrike. Now, supposedly this is re-recorded classics and new tracks. So this is kind of a mixture. I do find a lot of songs on here that are songs I already have. So I have yet to really sit down and say, well, which ones of these are definitely not pre-recorded from other albums and whatever. But this came out, and this came out on multiple types of vinyl, white and like a gray stone and like a blue, and different colors. It was released by Rock Savior Records overseas, and the vinyl was just out of my price range. It's on black too, and I have found a copy of this that I could buy that's under $30, but I haven't. So the color ones are really expensive. So this came out. This has a bunch of songs on here. This is a really good solid album, but this does harken back a lot more to the older stuff. It feels more older, not like the last few albums, like Devastation of Musculation, or Into the Noise, or Steam Clock, or even Thor Against the World. This feels more late 70s, early 80s, kind of a throwback. And then he releases Thunderstrike 2, same thing. Some of these songs have appeared on the past couple albums, so this is kind of like a retrospect, but some of them have been re-recorded, some of them are new. But I wouldn't really necessarily call this like a brand new album material, because again, it kind of harkens back to the old days. But then, and he has had some other a lot of digital releases of like lost tracks, and there's lost tracks and demos and stuff like that that have been released on iTunes and stuff. Next major album, 2015, Metal Avenger. This is an actual return to a modern sound. This was a band effort. Even has Betsy Bitch sings on here from the 80s band Bitch. Betsy, it's got Henry Rollins, Fast Eddie Clark, J.J. French from Twisted Sister. So there's a bunch of different guest musicians that have appeared on here with the band, as you can see. This one I have also picked this one up on vinyl because it did come out on vinyl, and it's on red vinyl. You can see pictures with Betsy and them in the studio, and various in the studio shots. So this was really kind of like 2008 was like the last, with Steam Clock was kind of the last album where it seemed like it was like a modern band. Everything since then kind of comes across as being re-recording of older material. So that's a return. 2015 followed again. It didn't take too long. 2017 we've got Beyond the Pain Barrier. Again, definitely more of a modern sound. Very, very good, solid modern day metal album. And this is technically really the last full band type album. However, I did just recently discover that I missed one. Just a month ago he released Christmas in Valhalla, and it's like the first Thor Christmas album. And I haven't bought it on physical. I did download it, but it's really good. It's not like him doing traditional Christmas music. It is tracks that he kind of has written, or they're not the traditional songs you would think of. He's got Donner and Blitzen, Gonna Have a Rockin' Christmas, It's Christmas Time, Sleigh Rider, S-L-A-Y, Our Last Christmas, Lend Me Your Ears, Not So Little Drummer Boy. So it's kind of his take with the Christmas themed, but in a really nice hard rock way. And I've really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to getting that. It's only available on CD. It'd be nice if they put it on vinyl, but hey. But then right before that one, he did release this. This is on Deadline also. It's called Electric Eyes. There's nothing in here. It's just, there's no booklet. It's just, you don't know what this is. The only thing that tells you what this is when it came, it did have a hype sticker on here, and I'm glad I remembered what it said. But this is the Lost 1979 album. This would have been after Keep the Dogs Away, before The Unchained. He had recorded this, so this is a throwback. And a lot of these songs did reappear on later albums, but this is the album the way it was meant to be at the time. A little better. It's better than demo quality, but it's not. It's a time at that time, 79. So it's a good rock album. Anyway, that's about it that we've got by him. He is still making music. He is out there. Like I say, a recent movie was released like 2 or 3 years ago, and a soundtrack. It's called I Am Thor. I saw the movie when it was on Netflix. It was really good. It kind of showed all the clips from the 70s and just kind of was like his story, all the way through to what he claimed was going to be one of the last concerts when he played overseas. He's pretty popular overseas, but had clips of him playing over there and how tough it was to get it worked out to get over there, and how he said, this is probably going to be the end. I'm just getting just getting to be too much. But since then, he's released 3 albums or so, so he's still going strong. It seems like, and having a good time at it. And so while maybe you haven't heard about him, maybe people don't take him too serious, he takes himself serious, and he's released a lot of music. And if you give it a chance, you look past the production, you look past maybe some of the cheese factor that people may criticize him for. I hear he is one of the nicest people, and I'd love to meet him. It was neat chatting with him just briefly on Facebook when I won that contest. They say he's just the most warm-hearted, nice person for that big muscle-bound guy who wears the costumes and stuff. But if you give it a chance, I think it's it's enjoyable. It's just a different, you've got to look at it as being more independent, being more of a underground type thing. And he's kind of stayed there. But he's got, as you see, a bunch of CDs, and most of the stuff is on vinyl. So like I was saying, if you ever find any of his vinyl out in the wild and it's cheap, I'll take it. Unless it's like just beat all the mess up. Any vinyl, 7 inches, picture discs, 12 inches. He's got a lot of stuff out there that's collectible, and it's hard to find nowadays. And it's collectible to people who like him, like I do. So if you find any Thor out in the wild and it's under $10, hit me up. Let me know. Buy it. I will most likely buy it from you, especially if it's vinyl. Anyway, I guess that's all I'm going to say for now. Thanks a lot for watching. It's been longer than I probably wanted it to, but got a long thing, a lot of stuff to cover. So thanks for watching, and rock on.